Thinking about booking some shore excursions? Well, before you book that dolphin encounter, swim with pigs, or ride a camel, stop. There's stuff you need to know, and we're here to chat about how to find the best excursions, avoid the tourist traps, and get yourself safely back to the ship before you become a pier runner. This is your guide to safe, smart, and epic adventures on land, right here with Wander and Chat.
I do love a pier runner, though.
Fun to watch, not fun to be. Of course, you know me, I've never been a pier runner.
I have never been a pier runner. I am already paranoid about pier running on my upcoming trip where we're taking a private car to Limerick, which is 2.5 hours away from the ship. My fingers are crossed. Nothing goes wrong. I booked us with plenty of time. We'll see what happens. But let's talk about Utopia of the Seas.
Yeah, so we went, world's biggest weekend. We did it over what people typically think is the unofficial start to summer. It was, I don't know how it was in your neck of the woods, but here it was cold and rainy and not at all May weather. And so we picked a great weekend to go. It was the most perfect weather you could imagine. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful skies, no rain at all, just absolutely perfect. Now you and I have been on Utopia of the Seas. We have talked about it in one of our earlier episodes.
Mm-hmm.
This is, one of the Oasis class Royal Caribbean ships. So it is among the world's largest. We had an interesting conversation recently in our Facebook group, which if you have not joined, it is Wander and Chat. On Facebook, we do all sorts of little discussions about travel. We talked about whether the people like these big ships. I think the general consensus in the group was people really like this ship.
Yeah, I like a big ship and I love Utopia.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I know we've talked about this before. It's got the neighborhood, so it doesn't necessarily feel unmanageable or gigantic. The only negative I think about cruising on a ship this size over a 3-day weekend is that you cannot do it all at all.
Yeah, for sure.
We didn't do the zip line. We didn't do the dry slide. And we're like, wow, we really, we wanted to do these things, but we just, we had other priorities. But it's such a great ship for a weekend away. And it's just, it's a lot of fun.
And you went this time with your college age kids. So how did they like it? Because I've been with little kids and I've been just with grownups. So what did they think?
They loved it. So they had previously been on Odyssey of the Seas, which is a smaller ship, still large, but smaller. And, they really liked it. They were super impressed. They loved the Aqua Show, which how could you not?
Yeah.
But yeah, they really enjoyed the ship. I think, like I just mentioned, they did kind of wish like, oh, wait, we didn't ever go down the slide. Oh, we didn't ever. So, that was a little, something to do next time, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, they really liked it. And they thought, the activity level on that ship is great for tweens and teens.
It really is.
So today we are going to talk all about shore excursions. And these are the trips that you take when you are on a cruise and you arrive at a port. What do you do there? You have lots of options. And it can be intimidating because obviously you don't have unlimited time. You have a specific window. You want to do, you can do like one excursion. What do you book? We're going to talk about all about booking these. And we're going to start with the most obvious question. How do you even know what excursions to choose when you haven't been to this destination before?
Yeah, because it's overwhelming. You look at all of these options and it can really drive you crazy. You don't know what to do. But the first place that you want to start is your cruise line's shore excursion list. Every cruise will have one. They'll have it in the app or you can go to their website. But this is where you'll find all of the important information. It will give you things like whether it's appropriate for all ages, because some of them are not necessarily appropriate for little kids. They'll tell you how vigorous it is. They'll tell you if it's mild or if it's more adventurous. Personally whether, oh, sure, I can hike 32 miles and jog down, and you'll be able to tell right from there. It will also give you information about restrictions, like some of them have weight restrictions. Some of them have restrictions about mobility issues, like some places are just not wheelchair accessible or scooter accessible. So that's the perfect place to get started. You'll also on some cruise line websites, and I'm specifically looking at you, Princess, because I love that you do this. They let their customers review the shore
That's great.
excursion right on the website. So you can look at it and see if other people have said good things or bad things, or if maybe it's something that was more vigorous than they expected, or maybe a little more boring than they expected. So I love that. And if you can't find them on your cruise line's website, go to Cruise Critic, go to Reddit, but you can usually just type in the name of the excursion and something will pop up.
Now, when you book, you mentioned the cruise website. Do you recommend booking through the cruise website, or sometimes these things are available through an independent tour company?
I will always, always, always recommend booking through the cruise ship. I will also admit that I don't always, always, always do it myself. The big takeaway here is really about protection, because if you book an excursion through your cruise line, inevitably it's going to be more expensive than if you book it on your own or if you book it with an independent tour operator. But if something happens while you're on that excursion and you don't get back to the ship in time, if the captain has the option to hold the ship and wait for you to get back, they will do that if you're on a cruise ship sponsored excursion. You also have a guarantee that if for some reason they can't hold the ship there, the cruise line will make sure that you catch up with the ship. So if you have another port stop, they will get you to that next port stop. If you are on your way back home, they will help you get home, but the cruise ship will take on that responsibility. If you haven't booked through the cruise line, all of that responsibility is yours. And when we talk about pier running, I mean, you and I have seen it time and again. Somebody goes off, especially because you might be on your time, but you need to be on ship's time.
Right.
So there's a big distinction on cruise ships between ship's time and what everybody else thinks time is. And the time for you to be back on board is on ship's time. If you're not in sync with that, you haven't changed your watch, your whatever, you're not going to get back in time. And the cruise ship is not responsible if you've chosen to go off on your own or do a tour on your own. Now, having said that, you will find independent tour operators that can give you some things that a cruise ship sponsored excursion cannot. It might be a smaller group. It might just be somebody's personal vehicle and they're giving you kind of a one-on-one experience, which you may not be able to get on a cruise line. You may be able to get something that sold out on board on the cruise sponsored excursions. You might be able to find an independent tour operator doing it, and that might be your only option to see the things that you want to see. And my recommendation with that is never book an excursion that gets you back at the end of the day. You definitely want to book something where you have a big cushion at the end. I will also give you this side note and this little personal anecdote. When talking about making sure you have that cushion at the end, always check for transportation. We just did our Bermuda cruise, which we talked about in the last episode. And I talked about how fun it was for my husband to just randomly pick a ferry boat, and we hopped on it with no knowledge or information. And some of the knowledge that we were missing was when the ferry came back. We did our lunch. We did all of our touring around. We visited all the shops. We went back to the pier to get on a ferry, which we think at least in my head, I assumed it was going to just run back and forth all day long. No. There was a very definite schedule, and we had a 2-hour wait for that ferry. Now, in Bermuda, that was okay because we were going to be overnight. So even if we had stayed and waited the full 2 hours, we still would have been back on the ship. We ended up taking a taxi just to save that 2-hour wait plus the 45-minute ferry ride. But if you are not staying overnight, which most cruise ports are not, you need to know when the transportation will get you back to the ship, because you might not have been able to wait those 2 hours. You would have totally missed your ship.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's really important. And obviously, like, safety is important too, right? So you know that the ones that are through the cruise line have been vetted.
Yes.
So that's obviously important.
For sure.
Now, do these, you mentioned, like, it might be sold out. I mean, do they sell out? How do you know, like, do you need to book these in advance, or can you book it at the shore excursion desk? How do you handle that?
So the bad thing is you really don't know which ones are going to sell out. You don't know, and it's really hard to predict which ones are going to be most popular. So I would say if you have your heart set on doing something, as soon as you can, go ahead and book it with your cruise line. Now, there are some things that tend to sell out. Animal encounters are super popular. So if you're going to go swim with the dolphins or swim with the pigs or ride a camel or do any of those kind of animal exclusive things, those do tend to sell out. So you're going to want to book those in advance. If it's something that has multiple offerings like whale watching, if you're in Alaska, you can usually find 3 or 4 different whale watching excursions. You're probably pretty safe there.
Mm-hmm.
Some excursions have a limited number of admissions. So the Sistine Chapel, for example, or Dunn's River Falls in Jamaica, those venues themselves have limited admission. So you know in advance that your cruise line only has a limited number of tickets for that excursion.
Right.
Because they've only been able to obtain a limited number. So you definitely want to book those in advance. Bus tours, just like an overview of a city or overview of an area, those are fairly safe bets to wait until you get on board, because in a lot of cases, if they have popularity, if it looks like they're going to sell out, they just add another bus. But definitely, if your heart is set on doing something, book it before you go.
Can you trust the photos of the excursion when you're booking?
I mean, you have to look at this like online dating. You know, at 60 years old, this is not the picture I'm putting up on my online dating profile. I'm going to find one when I was still young and I didn't have crow's feet, and I'm going to use all the filters and I'm going to do all of that. Cruise ships are going to put the pictures up that are the best pictures. You will see a whale watching excursion that has a whale breaching and it's this big, beautiful animal out there, or you're going to find the perfect fluke picture of the whale tail coming up. Take those with a grain of salt. The pictures are meant to be beautiful and to entice you. The better pictures to look at are the ones that other cruisers have taken. Those are the ones that are going to show you what it really looks like. Is the water going to be blue and beautiful and all? Probably. I mean, especially if you're in the Caribbean, everything is beautiful there. The sand is beautiful. It's white and everything. But other cruisers are going to have more accurate pictures. You're not always going to find the rare fish while you're snorkeling that the cruise line might use in its advertising for an excursion. So definitely look for real life photos and real life reviews on Cruise Critic or Reddit or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's good advice in general, right? Everyone shows
Yeah,
their
for everything.
beautiful photos. What about fine print? Is there anything that you need to kind of be aware of when you're purchasing these excursions?
Yeah, you want to read everything. It's super fun to go through the list of excursions and you find one and it just immediately sparks your attention and you book it because you're like, I don't want this to sell out. I want to be on this excursion, but you want to read all the way down to the fine print. It will tell you if you need to bring extra equipment. Now, for the most part, if you book an excursion that has snorkeling, they're going to give you the snorkeling equipment. Or if you book something that needs some kind of specialized equipment, you will have it. But you want to double check. You also want to see how long the excursion is, and that will also be in the fine print. You might not want to be on a 5-hour excursion. You might want to be back on the ship, or you might want to book back-to-back excursions. So a 5-hour one in the morning isn't going to let you do the 3-hour one in the afternoon. If you are on some kind of medication or you need to eat at certain intervals, you want to know how long an excursion is going to be so that you know that you have access to food if it includes food on the excursion. You also want to have a backup plan because there are opportunities for them to cancel an excursion if they don't sell it out. If there's bad weather, there's a chance that an excursion will be canceled. It'll usually give you some of that information in the fine print. And the biggest takeaway about the fine print is always know the cancellation policy. Most cruise lines give you 48 hours, so you can't wait and see if the weather's going to be good or bad or whatever. You may end up on that catamaran in the middle of the Caribbean in a downpour.
But if you do book your excursion through the cruise line and the cruise doesn't dock at that port, that's a great reason to book through the cruise, right? Because they'll refund you.
Yeah, absolutely. You will get 100% refund from the cruise line. And I'm glad you brought this up because I know a guy who booked an independent excursion. He was meant to meet that excursion on the pier at 8 a.m., which in his mind was plenty of time because the ship was due to dock at 6 a.m. Well, the ship ran into some turbulent weather and didn't end up getting to port until 10 a.m. And he called the tour company that he booked independently and he was like, my ship didn't get here. What is your refund policy? And they were like, our excursion still went. It went at 8 o'clock. You weren't here. So he ended up losing. And that was a really expensive excursion. It was a couple $100 per person. So yeah, for sure. It always makes sense to book through the cruise line to avoid situations like that.
If you're going to book not through the cruise line, what are some red flags to look out for?
If you're going to book at the port, you want to look for somebody that looks professional. Sometimes they'll have a uniform on. Sometimes, especially the guys, they'll have on like slacks and a button-down shirt and maybe a jacket. You will always find somebody that looks like they're legitimate. The other thing to look for is a permanent fixture. Like if you get off of your ship and you want to buy tickets for, a whale watch or for a beach tour or whatever, go to something that's an actual building or something that looks like they didn't just set it up that morning and it won't be there tomorrow. These are places that are selling tickets or they're letting you book, car tours or whatever. Look for something that's there. And if they have some sort of certification or some sort of licensing, that's another good thing to know that they're kind of legitimate. If it's somebody that seems really, really pushy, if they can't answer questions specifically about the tour that you're about to go on, if they don't look like they're dressed appropriately, or if their sign is handwritten as opposed to a printed sign, those are all red flags. Definitely look again at customer reviews. Make sure there's a set meeting place when you book the excursion. Like don't have them say, oh, get off the ship and look for the guy with the sign. Because if it's a legitimate company, they'll say, get off the ship. We'll have the pre-printed sign with the name of the excursion. Like you'll be able to tell this just feels a little bit weird. Don't pay cash ever. If you're going to avoid it, don't pay cash. And I think, that's most of what you need to know. But you'll know when you get off the ship. It will just feel hinky or it will feel weird. Just make sure you're looking for somebody that gives you a little bit of confidence.
Yeah. And I definitely would recommend if you're going to do this third party thing to do your research before you get off the ship. So don't make that decision when you get off, book it.
Yeah.
In advance, do your research. This isn't cruise specific, but if you've ever been to the area of New York, like right by where the ferry takes off for the Statue of Liberty, you will have like 100 people coming at you. And those people are not selling you direct tickets. They've like purchased tickets. So now you're paying like a third party fee on top of what it cost. So, make sure when you're booking, if you are booking these excursions, if they're just going to take you to a beach club, just pay the beach club rather than a random person. There might be somebody who's selling you access to a beach that actually is free. Right. So that's why I always think you just should do this stuff online first before you go.
Yeah. And, there's definitely an advantage to booking with the cruise line because you know that it's going to be safe and secure and you're not going to get scammed. There are, especially over in Europe, like the Sistine Chapel, for example, which I brought up before. I know personally somebody that does tours in Rome. And we love him and we use him all the time. And on our last trip, he pointed out how extremely difficult it is, especially because it's the Jubilee year in Rome and there's a new pope. It is so extremely difficult to get admission tickets to attractions like the Sistine Chapel. So if you're just getting off of a ship or coming out of your hotel and finding some guy on the street that's like, oh no, we've got Sistine Chapel tickets. Right. That's a huge red flag. We know legitimate people have been struggling to get some of these tickets. Right. So what makes you think some random guy on the street is just going to have a pocket full of them? So definitely do your vetting and read your reviews. And for something big like that, just book through the cruise line.
And so, we've talked about this a little bit, but how are we protecting ourselves with excursions?
The biggest thing you can do is take out some sort of travel insurance. If you have travel protection, most of them will cover you if you miss an excursion because the ship got in late, if your excursion people don't show up, if they have to cancel it for bad weather or for whatever reason. Travel insurance is probably your best bet. Reviews, reviews, reviews. We talk about this with a lot of stuff. You will not know for sure if the reviews are honest. They can be dishonest, but there's going to be a preponderance of evidence. There's going to be a lot of good reviews, or there are going to be a lot of the same type of complaints. Driver didn't show up. Excursion got canceled. If you see those kind of things, you just want to avoid them and never be tempted by offers that are too good to be true, like the guy with the pocket full of Sistine Chapel tickets for cash. Always be on alert for things like that.
That makes sense. What are, obviously, so you're paying for your cruise already, and now you've got to pay for excursions. Some of them are quite pricey.
Yeah.
What are like the best bang for your buck excursions?
So you're going to find excursions in a huge variety of prices. And because they have different activity levels, like mild ones all the way up to really adventurous ones, the bang for your buck is really going to depend on what you personally are looking for. Now, if you're an adventurous type person and you can gain access through a ship's tour to an area that you've been dying to try, it's your bucket list thing, like Dunn's Falls in Jamaica, maybe that's something you've always wanted to hike and you know they only allow a limited number of people, that's an excursion that you might be willing to pay for.
Right.
Food tours. We've done those. You and I have done them. I've done them with my family. They tend to be really reasonably priced. And not only do you get a taste or a sampling of local cuisine, but you also kind of get an overview of the area because the transportation to these food venues usually takes you past something interesting to see. So you're sort of getting a 2-for-1 deal. You're getting like a little tour of the city, plus you're getting access to these food places or these popular dining establishments. Smaller tours are always going to be more expensive. And I see them more and more popping up with cruise lines, like a 6-person car tour. They're going to be more expensive, but with a smaller group, a more intimate atmosphere, you're going to be able to see more than you would if you've got a bus of 60 or 80 people and at each stop you've got to load and unload all of these people. A smaller tour will be more expensive, but you're going to see more, you're going to do more. You may have access to spots that a big motor coach won't have access to.
Yeah, I mean, we did that food tour in the Dominican Republic, and it was like food tour / city tour, which was great. We got to do basically everything I would have wanted to do. And I mean, we got some pretty significant food samplings on that trip.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was maybe $100 or a little bit less. And we had great photo opportunities. We had really good food. And we went to places that I think if I had just gotten off the ship myself, I never would have gone to those places. I don't think they would have been on my radar. But I thought our food was good. I thought our access to an overview of the area was good. So I love a food tour.
We had a lot of rum. I remember we had probably limitless rum, I think, if we were willing to.
Yeah, I had to tap out. After like 2 samples, it was like, this is, I did not know this was a thing. I'm not going to be able to get home here.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of rum that was being offered at that trip. So are there ports where you can just skip booking the excursions?
Yeah. And, we talk a lot about Nassau. People tend to stay on the ship in Nassau, but not even if you don't want to stay on the ship, there are just some ports that are easy to walk around. If you just want to go to a beach and you're in a Caribbean island, chances are you can get to a beach with very little hassle. You can take a taxi. Some places have shuttles. Alaska has there's some ports there that are very walkable. Even when I did Australia and New Zealand, most of the little communities there provided for free a shuttle that took you to the main part of the city. So if you just wanted to do like a walking tour of the city, you didn't need to book anything because you could just take the shuttle. And even if it's not free, a lot of the city buses or local shuttles for just a couple of dollars will run, and that will get you to the city center where you can find the museums and the restaurants and stuff like that. Nassau is one. Key West for sure. Just get off the ship and you can walk around. It's a very, very walkable port. And there are a lot of European ports that are the same way. Now, when you go to Europe and you hear that you're stopping in Rome or you're stopping in Paris, this is where your geography comes in really handy because there's no water there. So you don't know, like you're not pulling up to Paris and hopping off. You're going to be a 2-hour drive from like Civitavecchia to Rome or whatever. So those are not places where you want to skip an excursion because it's going to take you all day to get there. But definitely, some of the other European ports, you can just get off of the ship and walk around, or you'll find the city bus located right there.
And the US based ports, like you mentioned Key West, but obviously like Boston, New York, Seattle,
Absolutely.
you're right there. And, those, obviously won't have the language barrier, a lot of transportation available at all times in those places. So, you probably feel more comfortable. I know personally, I would feel more comfortable if I happen to get stuck overnight and I was like in Seattle versus
Yes.
being in a Caribbean island where there may not be an easy airport or an easy way to get home, don't have like
Yeah,
your
that's for
documentation.
real.
So yeah, definitely options. And in terms of ports, like I mean, Costa Maya is going to be changing over to a Royal Caribbean themed, but that port I love. There's plenty of stuff to do right there. I believe it was Puerto Plata that we went to that had the lazy river. So yeah, look into the like what's at the specific port because there are cases where you don't even need to like leave the port.
Yeah, and other places like Dublin, a lot of times when you're over in Ireland or you're doing a British Isles cruise or some of the cruises, they'll tender you over, which automatically I think for a lot of people means I should book some kind of an excursion because I've got to do the tender, and the tender, I'll have easier access to the tender if I book an excursion. But really, if you just wait until the bulk of the excursions leave in the morning and you take a tender over, you'll have access to everything that you need to have access to without a shore excursion.
Great. So I think if you've been on excursions in specific ports that you would like to recommend that you loved, or maybe ones you didn't love, definitely reach out to us, leave us a comment, or, we mentioned before our Facebook group. It's called Just Wander and Chat on Facebook, and let us know because again, reviews are the most important thing. And if our listeners can provide any sort of information, I think that's really
Yeah,
helpful.
that would be awesome.
Mail call, question stories, let's hear it all. From you to us, it's wonder and chat. So grab a seat, let's talk just like that.
So we have a couple of questions about our hotel traveling with kids thing, and I think they're really, really important. We talked about whether these hotels have amenities for kids like cribs or high chairs or stuff like that. If the hotel doesn't, do they let you bring them in from an outside company? Like, can you call a rental company and have that stuff delivered?
There are rental companies, and sometimes, people will even rent like a stroller or, um, other equipment. And, I think typically hotels are good with that. They might even recommend one. So it's a good option if you're not going to be able to pack one in your car. But I mean, a lot of hotels do offer cribs or some sort of portable crib. But yeah, check with the hotel. But yeah, typically that's definitely an option.
I would also reiterate that you can ask them for recommendations because chances are if they have somebody that they recommend, they know that they're reliable. They wouldn't give you the name of some place that like doesn't show up. But also, when you're calling like I had kids that refused to sleep in a pack and play. Absolutely flatly refused. And back in those early days of traveling, I just put them in bed with me because I didn't know it was an option that I could call somebody and get like a real crib delivered. But now I know that you can sometimes. And where can you find some of this information? If I'm brand new to traveling and I'm booking my own travel, where do I find out if breakfast is included or if they've got cribs and stuff like that?
The hotel website is always a good place to start. Something like free breakfast, a lot of these popular chains will have a complimentary breakfast, something like a Staybridge Suites or an Embassy Suites. Typically, those chains will offer those things. So you can start with that. I've also found with some hotels, particularly like the higher end chains, that you can book, a room that includes breakfast. So, that's something that might be worth it if you are going to have breakfast at the hotel every day. Now, if you know, are in a situation where there's a Dunkin' Donuts next door and your kids are going to want a breakfast sandwich and not a full breakfast, it might be more affordable to do that than to pay for having breakfast included, but that's something you'll want to look out for.
Yeah. And if you are not booking through a hotel website, which I recommend over using other services, but if you are going to someplace like Expedia, to find some of that information, you may have to click a couple of buttons that give you
Right.
like the full list of hotel amenities. Or like if you go down to where it gives you your room options, it will tell you if the room includes a free breakfast or if there's an extra charge. So make sure you're scrolling and you're looking at everything. We have huge Disney news this week because I am a fan of the Main Street Electrical Parade, which I feel deprived of. So I am super excited that there is a brand new Disney nighttime parade.
This is a brand new parade.
Yeah.
They say it's inspired by the Electrical Parade.
Yeah.
But, typically there haven't been nighttime parades that are accessible to just regular guests who aren't booking like a Very Merry Time or Mickey's Very Merry Christmas or a Halloween party, right? So this debuts July 20th.
Yes. July 20th, Disney's Starlight Dream the Night Away Parade. I will never remember that, but I will be booking a trip specifically for this because the nighttime parades just for me were always so much more magical, so much more beautiful. I've only seen artist renderings so far of the floats because I think that's the only thing available. And even just the pictures are so pretty. I can't wait. And I imagine technology in, like lighting and stuff since the Main Street Electrical Parade has come a long way. So I probably have unrealistically high expectations for this parade.
Because of this parade, there are changes to how your access to the Magic Kingdom with an annual pass works, right?
Yeah, there sure is. So if you are an annual pass holder, you know that you need a reservation to go to the parks unless it's on what they call a good to go day, or if you're not going to go till after 2:00. On a good to go day, you can just go to the parks without a reservation. Or if you just want to go after 2, you do not need a theme park reservation. However, starting with the debut of the parade on July the 20th, you are going to need a reservation at the Magic Kingdom, not the other parks, but at the Magic Kingdom, even if you don't plan on going until after 2:00. And, this is definitely something that you might think, oh, I'll just go and grab dinner and then watch the brand new parade. You are going to need a park reservation for the Magic Kingdom after July 9th when this parade debuts. I'm sure down the road when there's not such a high demand for the parade, it'll probably go back to the way it is right now. But just know if you're an annual pass holder and you want to go to the Magic Kingdom, you definitely are going to need a reservation.
Yeah. And they'll probably revisit this as they see what the expected demand is for this parade. But it seems like they're anticipating that it will be high demand because, it is something exciting.
Yeah, it is. I think this is a significant, and there have been so many new developments over the last year or 2 years at Walt Disney World, but I think this one has been really highly anticipated. You've got all these old school Disney people that are like, yes, we want to go see this new incarnation of a nighttime parade. So, and they're debuting it in the middle of summer. So I think if anybody was on the fence about, should we go to Disney? Is there going to be enough new stuff to see and do? I think this might kick somebody over the edge to say, yeah, let's just go. We'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be awesome. All right. That is it for another episode. We will be back next week and we will be talking about plane travel interruptions. We've too much experience with this, Jodi.
Especially recently. You had quite an experience.
Yeah. And, that's definitely something that you'll want to tune in for, especially if Newark is one of your airports that you favor. But we'll be talking about plane travel interruptions. We look forward to you joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like buttons on the videos. Leave us some feedback. Leave us a review. Let us know how you're enjoying it. Let us know if there's something that you'd like us to cover that we haven't covered, because we really do value your feedback.